I'm Gary DeMar, and I'm going to deal with the topic of culture wars. I was watching a short clip by John MacArthur on the topic of culture wars, and I'll let the opening of this particular clip introduce what I want to deal with today.
I really couldn't care less about the culture war. I wouldn't give 10 seconds to worrying about the culture war. What are you talking about? Two temporal opposing moral philosophies?
The bigger question is, what is culture? Henry Van Til described culture as religion externalized. That is, when you look at culture, you actually see a person's religion. What a person believes about something is manifested in the way they live their own lives. It's the type of cultures that they build. Cultures aren't neutral. Cultures develop from a particular worldview, a religious worldview, what people think about the world. Atheists have a cultural manifestation. We saw this throughout the 20th century with what atheists have done with their religion externalized. Now, this isn't to say that every atheist kills people because of their atheistic worldview. But every worldview has a particular manifestation over time. And in the case of Christianity, of course, Christianity has a particular culture. You can go around the world and you can see what Christianity has done in various cultural outlets. If you want to know where a person's allegiance is, look at his culture. A person's culture is the externalization of what he believes. It tells you who his God is and what he's committed to. And this is how George Grant describes culture. He says, culture is simply a worldview made evident. It is basic beliefs worked out into habits of life. It is theology translated into sociology. Culture is a very practical expression of the common faith of a community of people or a nation. What a person thinks, what he believes, what shapes his ultimate concerns, and what he holds to be true in his heart. In short, his faith or lack of it has a direct effect on his material well-being, behavior, and outlook, on his sense of what is good, true, and beautiful, on his priorities, values, and principles. After all, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Psalm 23:7. The Christian faith changes people. Therefore, the Christian faith changes culture. So when John MacArthur talks about a culture war, he is really dealing with manifestations of two religious operating systems. And of course there's going to be a war between the two of them. And I know John MacArthur is trying to say, look, you've got to get people converted. Why are you worrying about the culture? The reason is because culture is a manifestation of what people believe. And since it's a manifestation of what people believe, someone's unbelieving operating assumptions reflect back on the rest of us, our next door neighbors, governments. Anything that takes place in the world is an expression of someone's worldview. And so if someone outside of a Christian context is dealing with governmental issues, if they're dealing with taxation, if they're dealing with homosexual marriage, if they're dealing with abortion, that's a manifestation of somebody's worldview. You're dealing with slavery, kidnapping, sex exploitation. These are all expressions of somebody's worldview. Those are cultural clashes, but at the bottom of it all is a clash between two religions. So that means that culture is an inescapable concept. There is no way to ignore it or escape it. You are either changing culture or being changed by it. So what about this idea of a culture war? Well, the war began in the garden. After the fall, we hear God saying, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel." Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. So right from the beginning, we see a culture war, which is a manifestation of somebody's religion. A person's religion manifests itself in the world in which he lives. The Bible is all about a culture war. It's never been about anything else. As long as we understand a culture war is being a manifestation of somebody's religious expression. We have always been at war with unbelieving thought and unbelieving cultures. That's just the way it is. That's the nature of religion. And so I think part of the problem with John MacArthur's concepts about all this is he really never defines culture. He never defines what a real culture war is. So there are two competing worldviews with two ways of salvation and two philosophies of life that affect everything. God created the world and said it was very good. Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. And you get into the New Testament, even after the fall, we know that everything God made is good. It's our use of those things that determine whether something is good or evil. It's not the things in and of themselves, it's only the way that they use those things. God designed his world to be cultivated. Because of the fall, there were those who will war against a biblical culture. The Bible is the story of that war. The title of MacArthur's video is, Should Christians Be Focused on Taking Back the Culture? If by focused he means concerned about the externals of culture, with cultural development without the gospel, then I would answer no. You see, I think, again, this is the either-or fallacy. We need to either preach the gospel or deal with culture. That is a false dichotomy here. Preaching the gospel changes people's idea of what their culture should be, their expression of their belief system. Of course we should prioritize with the gospel. We believe that people should have changed hearts and changed minds and changed hands, and which is then the manifestation of culture. So to get back to the initial question that John MacArthur raises, should we prioritize changing the culture? The culture is going to be changed one way or another. The question is, what role will Christians have in changing their culture? What role will Christians have in pushing back against unbelieving cultural thought based upon false religion? That's the issue of the day. I'll follow up this initial talk with a few more dealing with this very short clip of John MacArthur. So stay tuned for future editions of this series.